Okay, quick favor before I start. So it's kind of hard to project in this class for some reason for me.
Yeah.
So
come closer.
well, I'm as close as I can now. I'm practically on top of you guys.
Yeah.
So I would ask, please abstain from any conversation because then I have to speak over you, right? And it's like straining my voice and it's super tiring. The people in the back, why don't you all kind of squeeze forward? That will help you too, actually. People in the third row, just move your seats forward. You see what I mean? Everybody move forward a little bit.
I'm close enough, right?
You're good. Yeah. You could do that. And then Ron could join us. Yeah, come a little closer. Why are you so far? Why is there a big gap over there? That's my question. In front of Nobel. Why are you so far away from the Euros? Okay, that sounds good. That's the idea. So yeah, move everyone a little closer. And yeah, please abstain from conversations. I gave you 20 minutes now to talk. That way I don't have to talk over you. Okay, awesome. Cool. All right, let's start with Rumi. So I hope you notice that this is the complete opposite of my money, right? So what I want to do is talk a little bit, contrast them a little bit. This is actually also a test question, so it'll be useful for you. So they're actually on the opposite end of the spectrum, right? And there were equivalent Jewish writers who were like Rumi, right? Who were poets and so forth. And there were also Muslim writers who were like Maimonides, right? So this is not an Islam Jewish thing, right? This is just the two different styles that you found in both faiths. They were very, very similar in the way they were writing. And in these two genres, right? Both Muslim and Jewish writers have the very kind of systematic approach that Maimonides had. We have the equivalent of in the Arab world of Maimonides is Averroes, right? Averroes. So he's the equivalent. And then in the equivalent in the Jewish world of Rumi would be somebody like, let me think, where are the Jews in the class? Correct me if I'm wrong. The one who is called Yehuda. Are you familiar? Medieval poet. No, you don't know? You didn't study?
I'm not Jewish.
Yes, I know. There is a writer who, I think his name was Judah something. Judah Halevi? Does that ring a bell? Judah Halevi? I have to look it up. See, this is crazy. But yeah, he's also, if that's the one, he's also writing poetry, very mystical poetry, just like Rumi, right? So this whole time is really interesting. So anyways, let's go to examine how Rumi is the opposite of Maimonides, right? So let's review. Maimonides, where do you connect to God? Which part of your body? The mind. Okay, very good. Brain. Rumi, which part do you use? The heart. Very good, the heart. Very different, right? And then for Maimonides, where does suffering come from?
I think ignorance of my property.
From us, right? Okay. We create the best conditions of suffering, right, for each other. We don't need God to be out there, manipulating anything. We do a very good job ourselves at creating miserable conditions for ourselves, right? So, so suffering comes from human interaction, human mistakes, human greed, human corruption. This is where most of our suffering comes from, right? Now, Rumi is going to have the opposite approach. No, Ben, you look puzzled.
No, Mama, you said mind was the mind or heart?
Mind. Yes, good. So Rumi, right? Am I competing with this guy? Oh, no. So Rumi, of course, is going to say that this is going to be very interesting, that suffering actually is a gift from God, right? It's a very different approach. I need a doorman. Rubina, will you be our doorman? So for now, just close the door, and then if someone is knocking, you open. Thank you. Keep you on your toes, so you don't fall asleep over there in your corner. Okay. Because there's this guy with a microphone. Thank you. Okay, so right, it's a gift from God, and we are going to see why is God giving us this gift of suffering, right? We're going to see that in the second poem that we're going to do. So for now, we're going to focus on this particular knowledge of God, right, that we have in Rumi. This is the title of our poem, right? Mystics Note. That's the poem I'm going to do. Anybody remind me the page?
11.
Thank you. Okay.
Assuming it's the same page.
It is, yeah. Okay, so we're gonna focus on mystics, no? And already the title, right, should be really, really interesting, right? Because we do not really think of mystical experience as a form of knowledge, right? The only knowledge we are aware of in the Western world is the knowledge of science. I know this because I can prove it. I can show you on the microscope. I can prove it through a mathematical equation. You can see how it works in the realm of physics, right? So knowledge in our culture is reserved to science. That's what we think knowledge is. And everything else, we reserve it to some kind of obscure kind of faith, belief, opinion, right? If you come to someone and you say, you know, I know God exists, they're going to laugh in your face. Like, no, you don't, right? Show me, prove me, right? And so we stumble, right? If we come from a religious background, we stumble in this world when we want to present our faith in God as a knowledge. People will be like, no, you don't know. How do you know? I'm not convinced. Show me, prove me. And we can't, right? By the way, how many of you saw Bill Maher's movie Religulous?
I used to be a fan of his years ago. I just never saw that.
Okay. What about the rest of you? Anybody saw that movie? You know Bill Maher? Yeah. Guys, okay. Bill Maher is a talk show host.
Yeah, I don't agree with him these days.
Yeah, he's kind of controversial, but and his movie also is controversial. He did a movie meaning to show how ridiculous religious mentality is, right? So he went around and interviewed Jews, Christians, and Muslims, and it was really, really kind of painful to watch. Like, he would ask these different believers, "How do you know God exists?" And they would attempt to give an answer, and he would each time ridicule them because it's impossible to give an answer in terms of scientific knowledge. You can't go around and say, yeah, the proof. One of them said, you know, oh, I know God exists because, you know, I needed a drink and I was looking for water. And did you remember this? And all of a sudden it started to rain outside. And so I could, you know, put my cup out the window and I received water. And this is the proof for that person that God exists. And then Bill Maher just destroys him, you know, butchers him, right? So when you try to explain the faith or the religious experience in terms of scientific knowledge, you will immediately look stupid. And I'm sure some of you have experienced this. You're talking to a friend who is very, you know, left brain, very rational, and they don't have any religious experience, and you're trying to explain it to them, and they're like, what are you talking about? Crazy, right? So we know, right? So we are not used to thinking. We usually think religion is over here for faith or belief or opinion, and we all believe what we want. There's not really a true knowledge. But Rumi is going to go against this view. He's going to say, no, actually, there is also a knowledge of spiritual experience. But we have to accept it's a different type of knowledge than the scientific knowledge, right? If you try to talk about the religious experience with the words and concepts of scientific knowledge, you're going to look stupid because it's a different world. And you need to apply different tools to these different worlds, right? Suppose you want to talk about, I don't know, I'm trying to think. You want to talk about the biology or the vegetation of on land, you're going to use different tools. You're going to have a jeep, you're going to have, I don't know, some guide, right? You're going to explore everything. But if you want to explore water, are you going to go on your jeep in the ocean? No. To try to explore marine biology? It's not going to work out very well, right? So this is what he's saying. When it comes to spiritual experience, it's a different world. And we have different approach, different tools, different way of knowing. And we need to understand that so we don't mix them up. Right? If you try to explore the ocean with a jeep, you're going to look stupid. Right? And that's what a lot of us do. We're trying to explain religious experience with concepts that belong to scientific knowledge. And so we look stupid. And so he's saying we need to separate. These are two worlds which necessitate two different approaches. So make sure you write this down, right? We are talking about two dimensions. And you cannot approach one dimension with the conceptual tools of the other dimension. There are two different approaches, two different ways of knowing. And once we understand that, we can begin to take seriously the knowledge, mystical knowledge, or spiritual knowledge. And it can begin to have again the dignity that scientific knowledge has once we understand it's a different type of knowledge. Are you all with me? Okay, so we're going to look today at what does it mean to know in the spiritual realm. Right, and we're going to see it's not just, you know, fuzzy feelings or actual knowledge. We're going to talk about that, but different from scientific. So let me anticipate a little bit, and then we'll go in the text. So first of all, what is soul? When we study science, what part of our body do we use in general?
Your mind.
The mind, right? Now Maimonides believes God also, right? That's another story. But usually we apply the mind to study, we look, we see, we feel, we touch, we observe, we analyze, we cut up in little pieces. That's how we do this, right? What is the tool we use to explore the spiritual world?
I'm guessing the heart.
Is the heart, right? So here we have, on the one hand, the scientific world, which we explore with our minds and which we will understand through our thoughts. Okay, make sure you get this down. Scientific world, we explore with our minds and we understand through our thoughts. The spiritual realm, we explore with our heart. And here's the interesting part. And we understand through what? Our emotions, right? Absolutely. So this is a very powerful idea. This is the idea that our emotions have a truth content. They're not just random mood swings. Emotions can tell you something about the deeper nature of reality. They can tell you something about the spiritual reality that you cannot experience intellectually, right? Let me say it again. So mind, thoughts, heart, emotions. And what we're learning here is that you will experience the spiritual realm emotionally, even though you cannot experience it intellectually. So let me explain what that means. That means simply this. This is the experience of many of you. I can guarantee it. You have a longing, or you have a pull, gravitational pull towards the spiritual realm. You sense there's something there, but your mind is like, it's impossible, there's nothing. And so your mind and your heart constantly fighting. I think some of you are dealing with this. Your heart is like kind of leaning in this direction, wants to. How many of us, right? I talk to a lot of students and they tell me, I want to believe. I feel there's something there, but my mind is not on board. Right? My mind is like, nah, this is impossible. This is stupid. This is just me creating an illusion. And your mind is destroying every step your heart is taking. The mind is like, destroy, cutting the legs of your heart, right? So Rumi solves this problem. He says, listen, they're just two different worlds that you're exploring with two different parts of yourself, and you don't have to fight. You don't have to fight. Your mind is not adapted to the spiritual realm. Your mind cannot comprehend. There is a limit to what your mind can know, and this knowledge is reserved for the heart. And to split it like that really helps, right? So it's like you're saying your mind in the spiritual realm is like the Jeep that you're trying to drive into the ocean and thinking you're going to get far. No, you're going to sink right away and be stuck in the mud and go nowhere. That's when your mind tries to explore, right? So he's saying it's a bad tool. It's your heart that can show you the way, right? So we're going to learn about that. So now, to understand more importantly, this notion of knowledge of the heart, it really helps actually to go back to Plato, which no one knows, but I will review. I will review with you, right? We did Plato already, I think, with, when did we do Plato? Did we do Plato? Did I mention Plato ever in this class? Yes?
Well, I think so. No.
I didn't mention the cave, nothing. Oh, I'm doing the cave next time. So this first time, okay. All right. So this is, how many of you are familiar with Plato? Just
It's an ancient Greek philosopher.
Yes. Okay, 3, 4, 5. Okay, very good. All right. So the rest of you, I will explain. So Plato, right, ancient Greek philosopher. Remember Sufism? What are the 3 strands that are going into Sufism? If you remember my introductory lecture, what are the 3 influences of Sufism? Anybody remember?
Suppose one would be an ancient Greek thought.
Exactly. And then?
I guess the other would be Islam, though.
Islam for sure. And the third one, surprisingly? Christianity, right? So when you read Sufi poetry, you get, if you're a Christian, you will resonate with a lot of the concepts. If you're a Greek ancient philosopher, you will get into, and of course, Islam is everywhere, right? So Plato and Aristotle are really, Rumi is aware of these guys, and he's in a way drawing from their wisdom to explain what he's trying to say, explore here. So Plato, who is an ancient Greek philosopher around 300 BC, actually wrote a book called The Republic, where he outlines all of his thinking on the nature of reality and so forth. And in this book, he talks about levels of knowledge. And this is the part that's interesting, levels of knowledge. And it's mentioned in the book with the name, The Divided Line. These are levels of knowledge. So I don't feel like drawing the board, so I'll just do visuals, like a conductor. So you have a very low level, then you have next level, and then next level, and the highest level, the 4th level, right? So we're going to explore these 4 levels together, and then you will see how Rumi is borrowing here from Plato to talk about this knowledge of the heart. Okay, so most low level is the level of opinion. Anybody know what is opinion? Lowest level of knowledge, lowest form of knowledge. Can anyone tell me what that means? What's the worst type of knowledge? Very low, primitive.
An opinion is like subjective. It's your personal preference, the change.
Yeah, opinion.
The fact is like not really changing.
Exactly. Opinion, you heard about it and now you're repeating it, right? So I'll give an example. I'm going to give the same example each time. This is here's a good one. I used to use the COVID example. I don't know if it's relevant anymore.
I don't think it should be.
Should we not?
It's a scamdemic.
Should not be scamdemic. Okay. I was going to talk about whether COVID was real. So this works.
And it is.
So some people are asking whether COVID is real, right? So first level of knowledge, opinion, what would it sound like when you try to convince someone COVID is real? What? Yeah, you say, you're like, oh, I heard from this source that, you know, COVID is real. And the person is like, yeah, you heard that. That's not very, do you know for sure? I mean, who is this source, right? But that's the first level. You heard, it's kind of knowledge. I heard this. I heard that it's happening somewhere in the world. It's real. So, but it's hearsay. It's opinion in the sense of you haven't verified it. It's just something you heard, but it still counts as a kind of lower degree of knowledge. Everybody good with that? Okay, next one, belief. What's a little higher level of knowledge when you believe something to be true? Let me see it. That's a little higher still. So this is, believing is still, you're in your mind, right? So how is it a little better than opinion?
Well, it's backed up by experience, there's more conviction to it than just an opinion.
Right.
You can just change an opinion quickly,
yes.
But changing a belief is harder.
Exactly. On that level, there's still no experience. You believe it because it comes from reliable source. Okay, so first one is random source. This one you check, oh, is the news, you know, or is whatever, some reliable source, or somebody told, a family member told you from over there that this is happening, right? So now you have a belief which has a little more foundation because your source is reliable, right? Okay, third level, it's a little better, which counts, Plato calls knowledge. Knowledge. This is something that you can, with your mind, figure out. Let's see if we can get that one, whether COVID is real with your mind. You're still no experience, right? You're still just figuring it out. Over here, it's happening over there, but you're over here. How would you calculate it that COVID is real? Yes.
Like just look at the effect of what it is in the real, and I think about like if it really wasn't real, then why is all of this like happening?
Okay, very good, right? This is more intellectual, like, okay, people are dying at a higher rate, you know, over here, statistics, and I have some, you know, actual mathematical evidence, right, for what's going on.
Example.
Why?
Like, well, like the question is not if it's real, if it's as dangerous as they claim.
Sure, let's do it like that.
It's not as dangerous as they claim.
Okay.
It was never just
We can change the question, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's change it.
I get emotional over this.
Fine. Why did I pick this? Okay. Is COVID as dangerous as they claim? And now you can read statistic charts and you can kind of see the hospitalization and you can see actually the scientific papers being published about the connection between this issue and this issue. Everybody seems really uncomfortable. Is this a bad topic?
Bad topic, yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. I thought we were over it. I thought we were good. Okay. No. This is not good?
No, it's fine. It's not that serious.
Okay. I don't know. Maybe some of you had deaths in your family.
No, it's okay. It's fine.
Trauma. We're good? Okay, everybody fine? Is someone going to walk out weeping? Okay. All right. So this one, you see how you're thinking it through. You're reading scientific papers. Reliable sources are telling you this death is unusual. It doesn't look like pneumonia. It's something new. It's something, right? This is the rate. So now you're actually doing some research, right? Okay. What's the highest level of knowledge, whether COVID is real and dangerous? We just did the research. Yeah.
Experience.
You got sick and you were in a respirator and you were about to die. Now you know.
Well, no, I had it. I was fine. Totally fine. A
Not
lot of
the
people
point.
get it, fine.
That's the point. Yes.
What's the name of the fourth level?
Intuition. Thank you. Someone is taking good notes over here, not getting carried away. Okay, very good. So we have opinion, belief, knowledge, intuition. And the intuition, meaning the actual experience of the thing, is the highest form of knowledge. Now, this is so important because this is where Rumi is going to jump off and be like, aha, I like this. This is going to give me the tools to discuss what I'm about to discuss, right? I have another good example with the sun, but I think we get the idea with this. Okay, so now if we were to apply it to God, you will see how it becomes very interesting. And then you will see how Rumi is going to borrow from these concepts. So let's look at the existence of God, right? Let's take the same thing. We'll do the same thing with regards to, does God exist? Okay, let's practice now. What would the opinion person say?
Like, I think he does or he doesn't.
Almost.
He's read it in the Bible or something.
That's a little better. Bible is sort of reliable, historical
He
document.
was told by.
Yeah, my cousin told me God is real. Like, yeah, okay. You know, it's like one hearsay, one person, random person tells you, and you're like, oh, that could be true. I can see. But okay, your cousin told you, some friend of yours told you. What's a little better? The level of belief. Now you were saying about. Okay, it's some scripture, meaning it's many people believe this, right? So there must be some truth to it. There's thousands of people in the world believing it. Many communities holding this scripture to be true. That's a little more reliable, but it's still hearsay. You heard from your priest, your rabbi, your imam, you're hearing that this is God exists. Okay, the second level, but a little better than my cousin over here, right? Knowledge. How would you know intellectually, by thinking it through, right, that God exists? So you're thinking it through and you're coming up with the argument that God exists. Yes, Rumi.
Maybe like questioning, how did space come? How did the sun come?
Very good. Excellent. You start to reason. Okay, everything has, this is what the medieval philosophers did. Everything has a cause, right? We know everything. A cause did this, a cause did this, a cause created us to be born. So therefore, what about the universe? What is the cause of the universe? There must be a first cause. There must be a God who created the universe. You follow the arguments? Kind of the idea that everything has a cause, and therefore even the universe as a whole should have a cause, and boom, you have now something that tells you there might be a first cause, which we could call God, right? Who made us, made us come up. Here's another really good argument. Anybody know another one of these medieval arguments for God? They're really good.
Something called the ontological argument. I can't remember how it goes. There's the
yes, that one. We'll talk about that one last because it's great.
Blaise Pascal had this Pascal's wager.
That's different. That's more existential, right? That's about experiencing. But what is the second one that you can think of? That proof, intellectual proof that there could be a God or must be a God. This is good. That's one of them.
Well, you could say that there's something above. There's something that has to be above, like the rules, like who made the rules of like nature, right? You know.
Okay, yes, you're on the right track. This is the argument by intelligent design. So you're looking at the world and you see a complex design, and you think, wow, surely there is a designer behind this design. Design like this could not have come by chance, right? There must be a designer, and therefore there must be some intelligence which created the world. It's called the argument from design. Even the staunch atheistic philosopher, 18th century philosopher Voltaire, Voltaire, who really hated religion, wrote a whole treatise why religion is bad for us, right, in the 18th century. He even said, I cannot conceive of a watch without a watchmaker. And he was hinting to this argument from design, that there is such a beautiful design, there must be therefore a designer, therefore there must be some kind of intelligence which made us, right? So these are some of the arguments you can come up intellectually, right, about God. The last one, just to fulfill your curiosity, the last one of these medieval arguments is the ontological argument. This one is kind of cool. I like this one. Let me make sure I get it right because I haven't thought it through for a long time. Yes. Do we all agree that by definition, right, if we talk about God, by definition, God is the being which encompasses all attributes? Are we cool with that? If we're strong, God is strong. If we're, you get it, right? So if we're loving, God is love. God is everything. He encompasses all attributes, right? There's nothing missing in God. Don't tell me he's, what about, is God hateful? Is God, right? No, it's all weakness and hatred is missing. You're missing love, missing strength. So when it comes to positive attributes, God has them all. And so the question is, if God really is God in terms of this definition, then he must necessarily exist. Because if he has all attributes, it would encompass the attribute of existence, right? So if you define God like that, then necessarily he exists. That's kind of like really acrobatics of the mind, right? So you get the idea, right? Yes, Rumi.
So I get the book of Job. Remember, a few of his friends, one of them said that John was upset about what happened. He said God doesn't depend on you. He doesn't need humans to tell him what to do.
Exactly.
You don't benefit. He's the one that's giving you the benefit.
Exactly, right? He has all the attributes and therefore no need, right? Need is a lack, or weakness is a lack, or evil is a lack. So he has all positive attributes, therefore must encompass, if we take this definition, the attribute of existence, right? That one's a little trickier. So you can see how intellectually, right, we can make pretty good proofs, right, for God. Now, what is the intuitive level of knowledge of God? Exactly. Actual experience of the presence of God, right? Being in the presence of God. At that point, no argument for or against matters because you've tasted God. You've encountered God in your flesh. This is a different type of knowledge than intellectual, right? If someone tells you, like we said with COVID, right? You just survived COVID. You're coming out of the hospital and you were on the respirator, and someone has the nerve to tell you, I don't believe COVID exists. What do you? It's like, yo, I don't care what you say right now. You're not convincing me because I experienced it, right? This is the same level of knowledge where it surpasses the intellectual knowledge or belief or opinion because it's the highest knowledge. I was there, right? Yes, right.
Wait, what is it called?
Intuition, right? Very good. Oh, yes.
The assurance can be something else, like for instance, if you experience God, people could think, oh, well, that was just a hallucination. Or people could say, it's still a bit hard to really verify that.
Thank you for that. Yes, so this brings us to the last point, and then we'll go in the text, right? Well, can we rely on this experience? Is it not sometimes something that we kind of invent, just to feel better? When we study Nietzsche, we're going to talk about that, right? But can we rely on this experience, or is it just my imagination? Maybe I'm just feeling, warm. Maybe I just had a cup of hot chocolate and now I feel fuzzy. And is this God, right? So, so to answer that, I would say that even intellectual knowledge can be wrong. You make a hypothesis, right? You're like, I'm going to check, and then reality shows you your thought on the matter was wrong. So both can be mistaken. It's true. And remember what Maimonides says. You will be mistaken with your mind if what? When does the mind start to make bad judgments, according to Maimonides? In general, yes.
When your mind is narrow.
Exactly. If your mind is narrow, if it's cluttered, you're not going to be a good scientist. If your mind is narrow and cluttered, right? And so Rumi is saying the same thing. Likewise, if your heart, and it's not narrow and cluttered this time, if your heart is toxic, you're not going to be able to feel the presence of God. You're going to feel other things, and your heart will lead you astray. So just like the mind can lead us astray, so thank you for that question, right? The mind can certainly lead us astray. If a scientist is too narrow-minded or too rigid, or they have presuppositions that they have to, right? They're not going to go very far in their research, right? But likewise, if the mystic, if their heart is toxic, they're not going to go very far. They're going to have a distorted experience, and it's going to lead them astray also. So yes, both can make mistakes. And so the key is what for the heart? What was the key for the mind? According to Maimonides, what do we have to do so we can have, a reliable knowledge with the mind, according to Maimonides?
Open our minds and be uncomfortable.
Exactly. We had the 4 steps of purification. Likewise for the heart, right? So the heart is certainly just like the mind. It's a legitimate organ of knowledge, but just like the mind, the heart can lead you astray. And we have many people who say, I had this experience with God and God told me to kill you. Right? It's true, right? I had this vision, and in this vision, this happened, and now I have to do this. And it's like, some people they think God is telling them to kill themselves, or they think God is telling them to kill people, or they think God is telling them to separate from you, or, So yes, the heart can also have distorted experiences of God, but doesn't. And so what is needed, just like the mind needed purification, the heart needs purification. And once the heart is purified, you will be able to rely on that knowledge, and you will be able to really experience these things that Rumi is going to talk about, right? And we'll talk about the purification of the heart next time, right? So we'll talk about that. So for now, we're just saying it's an organ of knowledge, it's reliable, and yes, it can lead us astray, and that's why we'll have to purify. Okay, so now we're ready, right? Now we're ready. So basically what Rumi is going to do is borrow from Plato. He's going to talk about also, when it comes to the knowledge of the heart, he's going to say this knowledge is not a scientific knowledge, it's an intuitive knowledge, right? It's not a rational knowledge of the mind. We shouldn't try to explore religion with rational knowledge of the mind. It's going to be an intuitive experience, emotional experience of the very presence of God. And once you have tasted that presence, nothing can disprove what you have just experienced, right? Of course, again, let's not forget, the heart can lead us astray, so we have to be careful to make sure the heart is pure before we venture out into mystical experiences, right? I was going to say something useless. Well, no, it's not so useless, actually. I don't want to lead you all astray. How many of you have tried to take these mushroom stuff for mystical experiences?
I have them.
Is that it? Yeah.
I have them at home, chocolate bars.
Yes. How many of you have that? Can I ask that?
You want some?
No, I don't. I got enough of Rumi here. But let me go into that a little bit, because this will help you understand. When you go to these places where this stuff actually comes from, like Peru, for instance, you go to a shaman, right? What do you do with the shaman for at least 5-10 days before you take this mushroom? You have to cleanse, right? Why? What if you don't cleanse and you start taking mushrooms? What's going to happen to you? The worst experience in your life. You are going to have the baddest trip. Exactly. It can be dangerous, right? We know, and by the way, if you're going to experiment with drugs, likewise, right? You want to be like, if you're going to do this, like, make sure you're coming from a pure place, right? This can help. If you're coming from an all messed up place, it's going to mess you. If you're already having mental imbalance, please don't go there. It's going to mess you up even more, right? So you have to be very, very sturdy, very strong, and most of us aren't, so just don't do it. That's my little just say no speech for all of you. But for sure, right? Any type of mystical experience, whether it's the God or whether it's what you will get through. I'm not saying these experiences are not legitimate. You can have a very powerful mystical experience by taking these substances, but they know the importance of purification. If you don't purify yourself for the experience, it's going to be something terrible. You're going to have demons coming over to take you. You're going to have all kinds of, dark, dreary stuff, right? So that's what he's saying. If you're going to go in the direction of very powerful experience of the presence of God, right? If you want to experience that, the only way to even have the experience is this purification, which we'll talk about, right? Okay, let's go in. Now we're ready to go in the text. How much time I got? Okay, Mystic's Law, page 11. Okay, so the first line actually is talking about something else. So I'll just explain the first line and then we'll go into what I want to focus on. This is where he talks about the stray camel. So he's saying wisdom, or the spiritual experience, right, is the true believer's stray camel. Anybody was able to understand what he meant? That some experiences, spiritual experiences, are experienced like it's like a stray camel that comes back to you. Anybody was able to understand? If you know Plato, you should be able to actually pinpoint what's going on there. It's another idea in Plato. Anybody know for Plato his theory of knowledge? So let me explain what Plato. It's just a parenthesis, but it's interesting. According to Plato, remember, our soul was not always in our bodies. Our soul was always in the spiritual realm. And when they are, and there in this realm, it knew everything. It had a God consciousness, right? So there was a moment in your life where you had God consciousness, you knew everything. And then the soul is implanted in the body. At that moment, forgets everything and kind of has to relearn everything. But very often, the soul recognizes things it's used to know. And those are the people who get really good at math or piano or whatever. They recognize it. Right? They're like, oh, I remember this, or I remember this, right? So all of our knowledge, according to Plato, is recognition of a knowledge we used to have, or it's recognition of a stray camel, a camel that we lost and then came back to us, right? So according to Plato, we already knew everything that we're talking about, and that's why when you guys are sitting in this class, and some of what I'm saying hopefully makes sense. Why? Because you knew this before. You're resonating with me right now. You're not learning anything new, actually. You are vibrating with what I'm saying because you know this deep down. You see what I'm saying? Everything I'm saying, you actually, anyone who at any moment of the class you're vibrating, you're resonating because you know this deep down. And I'm just saying it out loud. That's what Plato would say. So I'm bringing you back your stray camel, right? So he's saying here, right, the same thing with the spiritual experience. We are in this world. We used to be one with God, right? Now he makes it on the spiritual level. According to the Sufis, our soul was dwelling in the bosom of God, right? So we knew God very intimately. We come in this world, and all of a sudden we fall upon a scripture, or we listen to the teaching of a guru, and we're like, ooh, that's it, that's it. Why? Because you're recognizing the stray camel. You see what I'm saying? You see what he's saying here with the stray camel? Anytime you're how do you call it? Anytime you get excited over any kind of a religious teaching or even scientific teachings, because you're recognizing something you knew before. And that's, you're like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Why? Because you're feeling it, right? So that's what he's saying here. It's just an allusion to any time that we already know everything about God, and that's the reason why we are even sensitive and interested and attracted to some of these teachings by different gurus or teachers in the world, right? But that's not what we are focusing on. So let's continue. I had to say it because it's there. Okay. Now watch this. He has three examples. He takes a thirsty man, a baby, and then the prophetic encounter, right? So watch this, right? He's talking about, in these three verses, he's talking about the difference between intellectual knowledge and the experiential knowledge, right? And he's talking about the conflict between the two. Many of us, we long for God, we have attraction for the spiritual path, and our mind is there destabilizing everything, right? And that's what he's talking about here. And he's saying, once you've tasted God, your mind will have no more power. Your mind doesn't matter your doubts once you've tasted God. That's basically what he's saying 3 times. Let me say it again so you can write it down, right? 3 times he's going to say the same thing through these images. Once you've tasted the presence of God, whatever your mind is saying, your doubts or your questions, well, they'll still be there. They'll still be interesting, but they will have no power over you because you have attained this deeper knowledge. Okay, so whatever, if you have come to this higher knowledge of tasting God, of experiencing the presence of God, your mind will still have its questions, but it won't be a big deal because you have already acquired this higher knowledge. So this is what he's saying here. If you tell a thirsty man, here's a cup of water, drink. Will he reply, oh, this is mere assertion, leave me alone, oh liar, go away. Okay, what is he saying here? What is this? How is this thirsty man like us when we are face to face with a profound spiritual truth? How do we resemble such a man? Or how do we not resemble such a man?
Well, if you're thirsty, you will go for the water offer. You won't ask questions first.
Right. If you're thirsty and you receive the fulfillment, you don't care. You're not going to ask, does water exist? You're drinking it. You see what I'm saying? It's the same with God. If you're drinking God, your mind is like, does God exist? It doesn't matter. I'm drinking. Right? That's what he's saying. Right? The spiritual experience is like a drinking. It's like an eating. And so as you're drinking the water, right, or the presence, the divine presence, will you be bothered by these questions? And Rumi is saying, of course not. You're already in the midst of receiving this profound experiential knowledge, so that your other questions, your doubts, are not so, you're not going to, they won't matter anymore. That's what he's saying. If you're drinking this water, will you be still focusing on, oh, does God exist? I'm not sure who, no, you're already in this higher knowledge, right? Yes.
What if it's like saying it from a perspective of, let's say, an atheist, just sitting there saying, oh, I'm so thirsty, I have no water. And then someone just comes and it's let's say in the middle of the bed, and someone just comes here with a bucket of water. I mean, obviously he's not going to ask, oh, I don't believe in God, So I'm not going to accept this water.
That's exactly it, right? I like the way you put it, right? Imagine you're an atheist, right? And you have this thirst, spiritual thirst, which you cannot quench. Your mind is keep on telling you there's nothing, right? And one day you have this profound spiritual experience, right? That comes to you randomly. Will your mind still bother you after that? I guess that's the question, right? No, I had this powerful experience. Now the mind is not so important anymore, right? He says the same thing here. Suppose a mother cries to her babe, come, I am mother, heart my child. Will it say, prove this to me, right? Suppose you are, again, having this amazing experience of the presence of God. Do you still need proofs? Intellectual proofs, that's what he's saying, right? Let me say it again so you can write it down, right? The moment you are feeling this privileged moment, right, which is very rare, by the way. And in a moment, I'll ask how many of you have experienced this, but the day you have this powerful experience of the very presence of God, will you still need proofs? That's what Rumi is asking here, right? So I'm curious, like, how many of you have had this experience of their drinking or the water or the milk of God? How many of you feel you've had this experience of the presence of God so that your questions were there but didn't really matter anymore so much, right? Anybody can relate to it? A little bit, okay, 1, 2, that's it? Yeah, where are all my mystics? Good. So this is good that you're reading this because it's telling you there's this possibility, right, that is out there. Rumi is in a way an existentialist philosopher. He's not telling us what we should experience, he's telling us what we could experience, right, if we wanted. So this is always, these texts are always an invitation, right?
I think people usually ask afterwards, once they get what they want, they start thinking,
exactly.
Receive what they have.
Exactly. Did I get this? Was I satisfied by this experience? And then they know, right? Very good. So and then the last one, of course, when the prophet utters a cry from without, the soul of the people falls to worship within. This is the same idea, right? You resonate with a given teacher because you already have it in you, right? This is the same idea as the stray camel, right? And then finally, last line, right? And this is where he's the clearest. That wondrous voice is heard by the soul in exile, the voice of God calling, lo, I am nigh, right? Nigh means close, right? So this is actual, what Rumi is really talking about is intuitive knowledge of God, the actual feeling of the presence of God. At that moment, your mind can still complain, but your mind is at a lower form of knowledge than this higher knowledge you've just had, at least if we follow the Plato, right? Plato's take on this. Okay, good. All right. Any questions on this? Now we can discuss this a little bit. If anybody have some doubts or reservations about this or is there anybody has questions? We have like 5 minutes. We can talk a little bit about this idea.
So the question becomes like, how do you distinguish between whether your heart is clouded or not? Maybe you could argue like if you're feeling very, very bad, and maybe your heart would be more clouded than you're feeling very, very good. It's a bit,
So what you're asking is how can you tell that the experience is the experience of God and not something else? Very good. So Rumi is not saying this here, but I'm going to venture an explanation, right? In the Sufi tradition, God is seen as light, right? And so the heart is seen as a vessel for that light. If you read people like Al-Ghazali, he's saying this, right? That the heart is a vessel that needs to be purified so the light can come in. So light means that the experience of God are always going to be experienced as experience of light, not of darkness. So if God is telling you kill this person, that's a dark place. Right? So at that moment, you know, my heart here must go through some cleansing, right? So you know it's God when it's an experience of light, of peace, of joy, of love. At that moment, you know this is the source. When it's an experience of depression. So this is a good thing to know because a lot of us, we experience guilt. And we experience God saying, how could you do this? You have disappointed. Here's something people would tell me when I was a kid. So I grew up very conservative background. So we were told, this is great. We were told, well, if you go to the movie theater, I don't know if you guys had this, forbidden movie theater. We did. So if you go to the movie theater, you know, the angels are going to stay outside and weep while you're inside watching this movie, right? So I don't know how many people were raised on this kind of diet, right?
Forbidden because it's...
Oh, I don't know. You know, come to think of it.
Pornographic?
No, it's not pornographic. It's just, you know, violent, worldly. I don't know. You know, sex. You know, I don't know. So for the life of me, I've never understood that rule. So, okay, so you have some of these rules, and then you feel, so random rules, right, that we grow up with, and then we are here ridden with guilt. How can we know based on this whether this is the voice of God telling you, how could you do this? I'm disappointed in you. You really am sad. How do we know this to be the voice of God or not, based on what we just learned, what I just said? What does the voice of God always sound like?
Peace and light.
Exactly. So if the voice is telling you, you loser, you sinner, you scum, right? That cannot be, right? The voice of, but we have been raised to believe that the voice of guilt and the voice where we are thinking we are nothing and we have done so much bad is actually voice of God. But actually what we're learning here, voice of God always sounds like light. Voice of God always saying, yeah, you did this, but right? You're so amazing, nevertheless, right? So voice of God always uplifting. If you have a voice bringing you down, it's not the voice of God. That's what we're learning, right? So, and we have to, in a way, one of the ways we can learn to detoxify our system so we can better hear the voice of God is to learn to discipline our thought when there's a negative thought about yourself or about another person, to push it away. This is not what I need to be thinking. I need to resist these thoughts. And this is one way to detoxify the mind, is to work against this negativity that fills us, so that now we can have room for the other thoughts, right? Which will not emerge as long as you're thinking, I'm such a loser and they're such a loser and I hate everybody and I hate myself, right? This is all very toxic. We'll talk about the cleansing next time, but this is one way you can already work your mind. Yes?
So what if someone thinks that's not someone they're writing? And they don't feel guilty about it.
Yeah, but the other person certainly is not feeling too good about this, right? So any thought that brings you to distraction or anything, right, you know is not coming from the right. So this would be the test. Is the thought loving? Is it coming from love, and is it love, right? At that moment, you know it's God, no matter what, right? If it's a thought which is like, you know, you hate yourself or you hate someone else, your heart's maybe feeling something powerfully, but heart is so toxic, it's becoming like that, right? So you can have powerful mystical experiences of hatred. I don't know if I've had this powerful mystical, really possessed by hatred. And this feels very powerful and righteous, right? You can righteously hate this person or righteously hate yourself, and it feels very religious. But because the heart is still very unclean, that's why you're having powerful mystical experience. This is why you have, by the way, very powerful religious leaders who are clearly, you know, charismatic, very vibrant, but they're still saying stuff like, you know, destroy these people and these people are going to hell. They're having an experience in a distorted heart, in an unclean heart. And so it's powerful, but it's going in this direction, right? So you know it's from God when it's bringing up. Anytime it's bringing up, and if it's not bringing up, you need to cast it away. It's not from, that would be the idea. This is my going beyond, right? If God is light, any voice that is not light, you don't need to heed, right? Yes.
This reminds me of, there was a psychologist who talked about something, it's mixed with philosophy in a way. It was called the concept of self-actualization. So that's like when a person is basically congruent, they're in line with exactly what they want from their life, and they're exactly sure who they are, they're positive of their identity, who's God, if God doesn't exist. I guess that's in a way of similar to what you're saying.
Yes. Very good.
In a way you're in line with your, I guess, destiny.
Yeah, absolutely. This alignment with the light, right? We could say.
It comes with experience, though. That's why it takes, they say.
Yes, it's an experience.
To experience.
Absolutely. I love the way you're putting it, right? These things can only be experienced. I cannot go on the blackboard and prove you God exists, we have a soul, and God is light. Like, I'm saying these things, you're like, what? Some of you are like, what do you mean? Right? These are experiences I'm talking about that you can experience. We'll talk about how when we do Marcel later in the class, but already you can already know that the cleansing of the heart will automatically begin to bring these experiences. And we're going to talk about that next time, right? How do we cleanse the heart so that we can attract or start to feel these, just like when we cleanse the mind, right? God just flows, right? We saw divine providence just flows in the mind when it's cleansed. Likewise, when the heart is being cleansed, there are powerful opportunities for divine knowledge, which we'll talk about. So really good point. Okay, good. I'm good. How about you? Shall we conclude? Okay. Any other questions? No? Now it's too late. Yes.
Is it appropriate to say that you forgot something, even though you technically didn't, because your spirit is familiar with it?
So you forgot it, but then now you recognize it, right? So for example, I'm trying to think of an example in reality. Hold on just a second. There was a new question. Sorry. I'm trying to respond to that. Something you forgot. I mean, it could be like, does anyone have an equivalent in reality of something you forgot and then boom, you recognize it and it's like, oh, I knew this.
My bets.
A what?
My bets. My FanDuel bets.
Your what?
Okay.
What do you say? Do you,
I said, I bet, so like I knew something, then when it actually happened, like, damn, I should have picked that team.
oh, you're recognizing. I don't know. I don't know because it's just like you're regretting from it. It's something you knew.
Like the name of a song.
Maybe like the name of a
remember what the
song,
is.
and then the song comes on, and you're like, oh, I don't know. Sorry.
You're asking like for examples of that kind of thing, or
Yeah, she's asking for an example of something you forgot and then you recognize.
Yeah, like sometimes you forget specific words.
No, but I see what she's saying. It's not the answer. The question is not answered yet for you. I think it's something like that. Yeah.
Well, you were talking about Plato, how he brought this up.
Yeah.
I remember he talked about with the example he gave. He like had a kid with him who never learned geometry, right? And he was like showing someone that this kid like he's never learned geometry before, but like he was able to figure out like the shapes and like the size of this and that. He's never.
Yeah.
He was like remembering. He was showing that he was remembering.
So that's a good. Here's another example. Like you have, I had a friend like that. He was young, like maybe 10. He would get to the piano and he would just like. I took piano lessons 4 years, like crazy person, and he's just like naturally starting to get it in 1 week. Don't tell me this guy didn't know this. It's not fair. Like
I think that's gifts though.
that's what Plato means. Anytime you're gifted, why you're learning so fast? Because you knew this before. That's why you're learning it so fast. This is more the theory of reincarnation, right? You used to be a concert pianist and now you just remember it. You know how when you used to play the piano and then you pick it up again, boom, 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 right? So it's like that. These people who are talented are remembering a past life, or that's kind of where they're going, the Greeks.
I would say that learning something new often does feel like remembering something.
Yeah, sometimes like I have this when I learn certain languages, I'm like, oh wow, this feels so natural. Why? Because I had ancestors who were possibly speaking that
Like
language.
Romance language.
dance,
If you're
right.
French, you can learn
Exactly.
Spanish more easily.
Or certain dances, right? You
Yeah.
immediately vibe with them. Like, why? It's like, because you immediately get it right. Why? Because you have this. You remember your ancestors or yourself in the past. Like, that's the idea. Does it make more sense? Good. Okay, great. Any other questions? Good. All right. So good luck with the next part of. It's just running out. Next part of Rumi is the purification. How to really experience it.
Just to let you know, I'm not mad at you for the example. I just wanted to like